The sun burned bright over the cobbled streets of London, and the air was thick with the hum of tourists. Cameras clicked, children laughed, and a sea of curious faces stood in awe as the royal guards marched with their signature precision. But amidst the crowd, one woman stood defiantly in the center of the path, arms crossed, smirking. She had no intention of moving. The marching guards came closer, their boots pounding against the stone, yet she held her ground. A man beside her whispered, "You should step aside. They won't stop for anyone." But she scoffed. "Please, they're just guards in silly hats. What can they really do?" Before we go further, make sure you subscribe because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. The royal guards, unfazed by her presence, continued their march. The tension in the air thickened as the gap between them shrank. The crowd muttered nervously, stepping back, sensing that something was about to happen. But the woman, her confidence fueled by entitlement, planted her feet firmly on the ground. Then it happened. Without breaking formation, the lead guard let out a thunderous command. "Make way for the king's guard." His voice sliced through the air like a blade. The crowd flinched, startled by the sudden outburst. But the woman? She simply rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "Oh, please, what are you gonna do? Push me?" The guards didn't stop. The first one brushed past her shoulder with such force that she stumbled. The second one nearly knocked her off balance. And before she could process what was happening, a third guard's towering figure loomed over her. But instead of passing, he did something that made the entire crowd gasp in shock. The royal guard towering over her didn't just march past. He turned his head slightly, locking his steely gaze onto hers. His expression didn't change, but the weight of his presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Then, without hesitation, he did the unthinkable. With a swift, calculated movement, he stomped his boot down inches from her foot. The sharp crack of leather against stone echoed through the square, making her jolt backward in shock. The message was clear. She was in the way, and she would move, whether she liked it or not. A gasp spread through the onlookers, their whispers blending into one frantic murmur. Some pulled out their phones, eager to capture the moment. A man in the crowd muttered, "She messed with the wrong people." But the woman, her pride stung more than her nerves, refused to back down. Her face twisted in anger as she snapped, "You can't do that. I have rights." Her voice was sharp, laced with the arrogance of someone who had never been told, "No." The guard, unshaken, stood tall. His voice rang out with unwavering authority, "Make way, or be moved." The crowd stiffened. This was no longer just a minor disturbance. The woman's entitled defiance had turned into a public showdown. For the first time, a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. The guards weren't actors, and this wasn't a joke. She had challenged centuries-old discipline, and now she was seeing firsthand why these guards were feared and respected. But before she could decide her next move, something even more shocking happened. A second guard, just behind the first, took a step forward, and this time, his gloved hand reached toward his ceremonial sword. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was about to escalate into something far beyond what anyone had expected. The moment his gloved hand touched the hilt of his ceremonial sword, the air turned electric. The crowd went dead silent, eyes darting between the guard and the woman. No one had ever seen this before. Not in real life, not this close. The guards were trained for discipline, but this was something else entirely. The woman's arrogance wavered. Her eyes flickered to the sword, then to the guard's face, stone cold, unreadable. The authority in his stance made it painfully clear. She had crossed a line that should never be crossed. A man in the crowd whispered, "She doesn't realize. These aren't actors. They're trained soldiers." For the first time, the woman looked unsure. But pride is a dangerous thing. Instead of stepping aside, she folded her arms and scoffed, forcing a smirk. "Oh, what are you gonna do? Arrest me for standing? Wrong move." Without breaking eye contact, the lead guard took one deliberate step forward. The clang of his polished boot against the stone sent a clear message. She was out of time. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a deep, booming voice cut through the tension like a knife. Step aside. Now. Heads turned. A high-ranking officer in full Royal Guard uniform was approaching. Unlike the ceremonial guards, this man wore a darker coat, a golden insignia glinting on his chest. He wasn't just part of the guard. He was in command. The woman's face drained of color. This was no longer just a viral moment. This was a direct confrontation with the monarchy's elite. The officer's gaze locked onto her. His next words sent a chill down the spine of every witness standing there. By order of the crown, if you do not move immediately, you will be detained. The weight of that sentence settled over the square like a heavy storm cloud. Detained. Not fined, not scolded. Detained. The woman's breathing turned shallow. The confidence she had carried just moments ago had evaporated. But before she could respond, before she could even think of an excuse, the officer gave a sharp nod to the guard. And then, in a move that sent the crowd into a frenzy, the guard dropped his sword slightly forward, an unmistakable sign of impending action. The next few seconds would decide everything. A visible shudder ran through the woman's body as the weight of the moment crashed down on her. The smirk she once wore had vanished, replaced by something else, fear. The crowd held its breath, phones raised, waiting for what would happen next. No one had ever seen a royal guard break formation like this. No one had seen them react beyond their unshakable discipline. But now, a soldier of the crown stood poised, ready to act if she didn't move immediately. For a split second, she thought about resisting, doubling down on her entitlement, making a scene. But then she looked at the officer again. His stone-cold expression didn't waver. There was no sympathy in his eyes, no hesitation in his stance. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some tourist stunt she could laugh off later. This was real. And then, it happened. The officer's hand lifted slightly, a subtle but clear signal. The guard tilted his sword just an inch forward, his boots shifting into position. One more second. That's all she had. Panic surged through her chest. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over herself. Fine. I'm moving, okay? She shrieked, her voice cracking. The moment she cleared the path, the lead guard snapped his head forward and resumed his march, his expression unchanged, his movements precise as ever, as if she had never existed. But it wasn't over. The officer didn't move. He remained still, eyes locked onto her. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he approached. The woman, still shaken, swallowed hard. I didn't mean anything by it, she stammered, desperate to regain control. You were just disrespecting centuries of tradition. His voice was calm, yet piercing. And worse, you thought there would be no consequences. A lump formed in her throat. She had never been spoken to like this before. The officer leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You're leaving this square. Now. The authority in his words stripped away any last bit of defiance. Face red with embarrassment, she turned on her heel and pushed through the crowd, fleeing the scene. But the murmurs followed her. She thought she was untouchable. Did you see her face? She actually thought she could win. She got exactly what she deserved. But just as the crowd was settling, just as the moment seemed to be over, someone whispered something that sent a new wave of curiosity rippling through the square. Did you see the officer's badge? He's not just any commander. He's from the Queen's personal security detail. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just an entitled tourist getting humbled. She had unknowingly drawn the attention of one of the most powerful security forces in the world. And she had been 1 second away from being dragged away, by order of the crown. But what no one knew, what no one could have possibly imagined, was that this was only the beginning. Because the royal guard had been watching her long before she ever stepped into that square. As the woman stormed off, the murmurs of the crowd didn't die down. Instead, they grew louder. People exchanged glances, whispering about what they had just witnessed. But amidst the chatter, something else was happening. Something far more unsettling. A second royal guard, positioned near the entrance of the square, subtly raised 2 fingers toward the officer. A silent signal. The officer's gaze flicked toward him, then back to where the woman had disappeared into the crowd. His jaw tightened. It wasn't over. Unbeknownst to the spectators, the woman wasn't just a tourist who had foolishly blocked the guard. She had been noticed long before she ever stepped into that square. Hours earlier, surveillance teams monitoring the area had flagged her as a person of interest. There had been whispers, concerning whispers, about a woman matching her description testing security measures around royal sites. Small, seemingly harmless incidents. Standing in restricted zones a little too long, casually pushing past security ropes, brushing too close to guards. Individually, these acts could be dismissed as ignorance. But together, it painted a different picture. The officer's fingers twitched at his side. His expression remained neutral, unreadable. Then, with a sharp pivot, he turned and walked in the direction the woman had gone. He moved with purpose, but not alone. Two other guards, previously unnoticed in the crowd, broke off and followed. The woman, still fuming from her public humiliation, had no idea she was being shadowed. She pushed through the bustling streets, muttering under her breath. Detained? Seriously? Over nothing? Pathetic. She reached into her coat, pulled out her phone, and started scrolling furiously, probably crafting an outraged social media post. But as she turned a corner, something made her stop. Two men in dark suits stood at the end of the alleyway. They weren't tourists. They weren't locals. Their posture, their stance, everything about them screamed one thing: authority. Her stomach twisted. Something about the way they just stood there, waiting, sent a chill down her spine. She wasn't imagining things. They were here for her. Before she could turn back, a shadow loomed behind her. She whipped around, and her breath caught in her throat. The officer, the same man who had warned her in the square. But this time, he wasn't speaking for the crowd. This time, it was just her. And him. His voice was calm, almost too calm. You thought today was about a viral moment, but you have no idea what you just walked into. Her mouth went dry. This wasn't just about blocking a marching guard. Something much bigger was happening, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The woman's pulse pounded in her ears. Her mouth opened to protest, but the officer raised a single hand, a silent command. Behind her, the two suited men stepped forward. Their presence alone made her chest tighten with panic. This wasn't a joke anymore. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice losing the arrogance it had carried earlier. The officer's eyes remained locked onto hers. Cold, calculating. That's the problem. You don't understand what you've done. Her fingers curled around her phone, a desperate instinct. But before she could even think about unlocking it, one of the men smoothly plucked it from her grip. Hey, she snapped, trying to snatch it back. The man barely acknowledged her. The crowd beyond the alley never even knew. By the time tourists posted the viral video of her blocking the guard, debating over whether she got what she deserved, she was already gone.